Welcome, everybody. We're so happy that you're here today for this really special program with Ashley, Rooney, and Guy Doran. I want to make sure I say that correctly. They are master gardeners in in Lexington. This program, like all of our, hold on one second, Ashley. This program, like all of our library programs, is funded by the Cary Library Foundation. So if you ever donate to them, this is the kind of quality programming that you get. We will be showing some videos. I'll be sharing my screen, and we'll have Q&A at the in the middle and after. Ashley and Guy will be paying attention to that Q&A box. So like I said, Ashley and Guy are master gardeners in Lexington. We're really happy to have them. I'm actually really thrilled, and I don't think Ashley knew I was going to say this, but Ashley's agreed to do a weekly gardening program with us for a little while through the summer. So we'll be having that put together and on our calendar soon. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Ashley and Guy.
Great. Thank you, Mina. And yes, I am from the Lexington Field Garden Club, which we should let all Lexingtonians know is the oldest garden club in the nation. It got formed way back when they decided to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Battle on the Green, and several fine people in Lexington decided that Lexington was too much of a mess and they had to clean it up. And part of our mission has always been to educate and to clean up and beautify Lexington and its spaces. That's why it's so wonderful when the Cary Library suggested that we do this, and this way we can educate more people and help you with the way. And I am delighted to have Guy Doran, who is one of the expert gardeners in town. Many of us have known him for years, and you can learn a great deal from him today. So let me introduce Guy. We're going to go right to video number 1.
Hi folks, I'm Guy Doran. I've lived in town my whole life. Fourth generation owner and operator and grower at Doran's Greenhouses here on East Street, and we closed at the end of 2006. And then I had a job as a head gardener on an estate out in Carlisle for several years, and now I'm retired. And Ashley asked me to give a little talk today on containerized gardening, specifically for herbs and vegetables. So let's get started. Right here are 3 containers that we grow herbs in that we use almost daily when my wife Elaine is cooking. And they're in very nice old cement containers that stay right here, but you can use those and keep them outside. A few things to keep in mind is that they are slightly off the ground in order to give you a little bit of space for drainage. And in the bottom of the container, there's a couple of holes, and I used some crock. Not a lot, just enough to keep the holes from plugging. And then it's a mix of basically 50% compost and 50% soilless mix, peat-like mix, which I'll show you a little later up on the hill. The herbs that wintered over are tarragon, marjoram. I did have the thyme did winter over, but we wanted to change the variety. Here's another thyme, golden thyme, which isn't too common. You can get it at New England nurseries. It comes from a herb grower out in Groton, and she's the only one that I know of that has this particular golden thyme that's solid gold. It's not the variegated. Savory, oregano, and of course our chives. So, and this is a rosemary from last year, and we kind of, Elaine and I kind of have a bet going. I don't think it wins it. It usually doesn't. She feels it has, so I cut it back a little bit, and we're going to give it another couple of weeks and see with this warm weather that we have now, whether it will come out. And, you know, I think she may win, so but don't tell her. So, just to get started here, a couple of times. This is English thyme, and it's a good culinary thyme. Not root bound, nice. I might loosen up that bottom root a little bit. And I've already loosened up the soil. Right in. Keep the label if you tend to forget. And that's that. And by the 4th of July, this tarragon is going to be up really nice, and everything will be perfect for supper.
Hey, that guy is good.
Let's go see what he says.
Ashley, are we ready for the next video?
Yes. I think just run them right one after another now, so we can get to the Q&A. Wrong one.
Hi folks, here we are up in back of our house, and we have a small garden for growing about 2 dozen tomato plants, and these containers we grow more herbs, specifically basil and dill up here because we use so much of it, and we do grow some vegetables in these large pots. The mix that I use is this Coast of Maine raised bed compost, which is basically the same as what the town makes and offers free to the citizens. It's tremendous. But I mix it 50-50 with this peat-like mix. This one here is the Miracle Grow, and I find that a 50-50 mix is just great for vegetables, herbs, and flowers. So that's something you can give it a try. The containers all have holes in the bottom, and I use crock, but if you don't have crock, you can use stone. And I would say don't overdo it. Basically, you just want to keep the holes in the bottom from clogging and to allow the drainage. If you don't have either one of those, you could use your grandmother's old china, just break it up. The size of the pots is also important. People that want to grow tomatoes in pots, a patio tomato, which is designed to be grown in a pot and not get too tall, I would say that this 16-inch pot would be the minimum size for it. And unfortunately, a lot of the growers grow them in a smaller pot, and you may consider putting it into a little larger pot. Ideally, a pot that size would be great. That's about an 18-inch pot. And then anything bigger, of course, is fine. So, I think we'll start by doing some herbs. The basil, I will probably buy as plants in another week to 10 days when it's really just a little bit warmer. start off with dill. Now I filled these pots all this morning, and I didn't pack them down. I filled it loosely to almost the top, and then I went around the edges, and then just a couple of taps in the middle just to settle it, and then I brought it up a little more. Now, if I press down on this, it's going to go down probably another inch to inch and a half, which is fine because the water is going to settle it down that low. Now, this would be just like seeding something out in your garden, and I'm just making 2 furrows, not very deep. Most seed packets are going to give you all the information you need to know as far as how deep, how much to cover it. If you want to thin it, how much you thin it, so it isn't too thick in the row. I've got 60 years of experience of tapping this out just the right amount. And then I'm just gently filling that in, covering it with about 1/4 of an inch, and that's that. And many seeds, small seeds, that's all you have to do. Now, save the seeds, put them where it's cool and dry, and almost all the seeds, good seeds, will last for another year. So if you don't reseed or don't use them all up, save them in a nice spot, and you can use them again. A couple of companies now. Most garden centers have good seed racks, but if you want to go to another level, go to Burpee, or my favorite, Johnny's Selected Seeds. And it might even be worthwhile, if you really want to get into vegetable gardening, to get a Johnny's catalog, because it gives you a lot of information about all the different vegetables, and you'll find it quite helpful. I will point out as well that packets, either packets offered by the seed companies or the packets that you buy in the garden centers off the seed racks, basically is enough seed in that packet for what you want. Now, you'll be very tempted. If you love carrots or beets and you look at the prices on some of these things, you might find that an ounce of carrot seed is not that expensive. Well, in the catalog, it will tell you how many seeds per ounce. It could be as many as 58,000 seeds in an ounce. So I think you'll be fine with one packet. And a lot of times the packets that you buy in the garden centers are going to tell you how many feet of row that will plant. So I think you'll find that that's sufficient.
Now go to 3.
That's the beets. And those I put just a little thicker because we'll probably thin it out and put the baby sprouts into a salad. And one thing about beet seeds, each seed is not just one beet. They have several little seeds in what you see as a beet seed. So there'll be plenty to thin out and have enough to grow on as beets, but also to have in our salads in one night. The carrots, these are little mini round carrot, which will probably end up in a salad as well. Again, not too deep. This one, 1/4 of an inch, that's all it has to be. Lightly cover them over. Yeah. Now, I'm going to do some parsley. Okay, so we did the Italian parsley. And now we're going to do the French or curly. Again, nice young plants. Will grow all summer long and give us plenty. Now, fertilizing in containerized gardening is many times determined by the frequency of watering. Now, today I'll water these in, and probably for the next 10 days or so it will just be water as needed. But once you get into the warm weather, and this is true not only for herbs, vegetables, and specifically flowers in containers, again, fertilizing is determined by the frequency of watering. A good example would be, let's say, a hanging basket of ivy geraniums. And if it dries out every couple of days, you're watering it, you're giving it a good watering every couple of days. About every 5th watering, you would water it with liquid fertilizer. So that's once every couple of weeks with liquid fertilizer. If you had something that was drying out every single day and required watering, then you might be liquid feeding it once a week. Many growers, while they're growing the plants that you buy, are fertilizing them at a milder strength every time they water. And if it's every day, we used to, that we had things that required watering every single day, and we had a mild solution of fertilizer, so they were constantly being fertilized as they were being watered. So that's something to keep in mind. When you do water with fertilizer, typically you would give the pot the same amount of liquid that you would if it was plain water. If it required a quart or a gallon, that is the amount of liquid fertilizer you would put in when you were feeding it. So it isn't, don't just bless it with a little bit of fertilizer. You give it the same amount of liquid that you would if you were giving it a regular, clear watering on a daily basis. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, I've only got today one more thing to plant. That's going to be lettuce. I don't know how many I'm going to get in here. I think I'm going to get 8 heads in here. Think of a couple of things that I should have mentioned earlier. On containers, I showed you the cement container down there when we started, and if they have the right drainage, they can stay out during the winter. The right soil mix, it drains, and the right drainage on the bottom, and not sitting tight on a surface. This plastic pot and all these that you see here is a type of plastic that is what I call a 4 seasons plastic. It's a little more expensive, but to give you an idea, I've had some of these in use for over 35 years, and so they last, and they last very, very well. A typical plastic pot like this can very easily break during the winter, get brittle. These can stay out. Ones like this and most plastic pots can't. Now, before we go, we're going to go over to a friend of mine that's building raised containers so that he can grow vegetables and herbs in window boxes that are raised up, and his raised beds that he's been building. He's actually building them this morning. But before we go, going back to growing tomato plants in containers, I stake my tomatoes when they're in the ground. I use this 8-foot stake. It's in the ground about maybe 14, 15 inches, and it's not really quite tall enough. The other way of controlling your tomatoes is with a cage, and these work well in containers. If you have big pots, and I'd say this size or bigger, the stake works fine because there's enough weight, it doesn't tip over. But there's another factor that enters into this. There's 3 basic kinds of tomatoes, categories: indeterminate, determinate, and patio. Now, patio tomatoes are developed to go into a pot about this size, or a little smaller like I showed you, and they've been developed not to get too tall, and they work well as a patio tomato in a patio pot. Regular varieties of tomatoes, indeterminate tomatoes, continually grow, and they continually produce hands of fruit as they grow, and most gardeners and farmers will take the suckers off so that you have a main stem, main leaves, and the clusters of fruit, not side shoots that come off at the joint of the leaf and the stem. Determinate tomatoes are developed not to be pruned, not to have the suckers taken off, and they work well in cages. They'll have several stems that will come up at basically the same speed and all produce hands of fruit. And then you, in the case of commercial growers, they pick the whole field, the whole crop at one time, because they've all been developed to be picked at one time. But as a home gardener, as the older tomato in each hand of fruit ripens, you pick that off, but you don't prune them. So we're going to stop and go over to the other side of town. Okay, go. Hi folks, I'm back. We're on the other side of town, and I'm with John Kiernan, and we're in his backyard. And John started growing in raised window boxes last year, and then he and his wife decided that they would use part of their bluestone patio to have some raised beds. And so, John, these are fantastic. You made these. You bought the lumber yesterday afternoon,
yep.
And this morning you came out and you made this in one morning.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
This one took me about 2 hours, and that one took me 1 hour because I finally figured out what I was doing.
And this is about 8 feet long?
That's an 8 by 8, and this is a 6 by 8 board. I bought a bunch of them. And of course, an 8-foot board is on, it's not quite 8 feet.
Right.
And it's not quite 8 inches. So,
right.
This ends up being about 15 inches tall with 2 boards. And then that's about 23 inches with the third board.
Well, that's fantastic. That's deep enough to grow any, what I would call cool crop, root crop, like carrots, beets, onions, anything like that. And a lot of other things, lettuce, spinach, any row crop. This is deep enough, big enough that it's great for tomatoes, that you have the depth and you've got the soil volume, and I would guess that you could plant 2, 4, 6, 8 tomatoes very easily in here. And if you're going to grow a caged tomato, which would be a determinant variety, that you'd still have enough room. Or if you grew them on stakes, an indeterminate variety that's going to grow up, you still have plenty of room. So now, okay, so you got the box, and what are you going to do in the box?
We're going to put a soil barrier. It's basically a cloth that allows water to drain out. I didn't want to build a bottom to this and have rot issues. So with the bluestone, I don't want soil running all over the patio either. So the soil barrier, it's just a porous thin cloth that will go underneath, and I'll staple it around. And I get that at Ace Hardware right in Bedford. They sell.
Okay. And then the mix.
Mix, I'm going to go with some of the free compost from Lexington.
Yep.
And I'm going to put a little peat in there and probably some composted cow manure as well. Mix it all together.
That works. If you could get dehydrated like bovine,
yeah,
I would use that. And I would use if you used a 4-foot bale of peat in this one, yeah. I would use for the depth. I would probably use at least 25 pounds of the cow manure. And one of the main reasons for that is as the peat rots down, it robs nitrogen from the soil.
Okay.
So the cow manure is going to help. It's going to help in the decomposition, and it's also going to feed the plants, but not totally. You're going to end up feeding more.
Okay, great.
But that's a good mix, and it sounds pretty cheap.
Well, thankfully.
So we have a bunch of questions for you. Do you want to just start going through?
Yeah, click on that.
Okay, Q&A. The first question was the pumpkin question. While waiting, what is the pumpkin question?
So like the next question is, do you usually break up the bottom roots before you plant the herbs?
Yes. Guy?
Yes, it depends on the, how big and mature the plant is. If it has a lot of roots and it's kind of packed with roots, then you will loosen it up so the roots don't just so they can get out into the soil.
They show that for all plants now. Matter of fact,
Yes, right. That's true on anything that you buy in a container or nursery stock. Especially nursery stock. A lot of times, you've got a very dense root ball that you have to loosen up.
somebody once told me to cut an X.
Yeah.
Ashley, you're getting some feedback. Do you have your phone on or something too?
No?
Okay. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. So, but it's important, I think, to do that.
I saw Ann Sure advice on types of fertilizer. Organic fertilizer is always great to use over a chemical, but I don't have a problem with using chemical fertilizers. If you're using a liquid fertilizer, Miracle Grow works very well. There's several different kinds, some for flowers, some for vegetables. Neptune's Harvest is a very good organic one.
Okay. Do you mix the compost and soil equally or put the soil first, then compost?
You mix it up 50-50 as you go.
Do coffee grounds make...
I do it in a wheelbarrow. I put in, 2 or 3 shovels of each one several times, and then I mix it just like I was mixing cement in a wheelbarrow, if you've ever done that.
Do coffee grounds make good compost or fertilizer?
Yes.
I didn't catch that.
Do coffee grounds make good compost? Or
They can go into the compost, sure.
Do they make
And
good
eggshell.
fertilizer?
Soak and tea bag, eggshells, lots of things can go into your compost. It's really good for it.
Do you cover the trench lightly with soil or not at all so birds don't eat the seeds?
I typically don't have a problem with the birds eating seeds. Most everything gets a light covering. I'm trying to think of I know there are some flower seeds that you don't cover. They require light to germinate, but off the top of my head, I can't think of any vegetables that require light for germinating. If they do, it would indicate either in the seed catalog or on the seed packet, which just brings something to the back of my mind. If you are doing flowers, especially some perennials, and again, it will indicate in the catalog or on the seed packet that some perennial seeds require a period of being frozen.
Right.
So the one that comes to mind is delphinium.
Yep. There are others that you have to be, they soaked in water. I had one, castor oil seeds was another one. Read the seed packages carefully.
Okay, is now the time to plant tomato seeds or is the best to wait for warmer, consistent weather?
Tomato seeds should have been planted about 1 to 2 months ago.
Yes.
This is the time after let's say tonight. I think the full moon is tonight, but we could have a slight frosty nights tonight and maybe tomorrow night. There was a light frost last night. This morning at 4 o'clock when I got up, the roof of the car was all frozen. So let's say next week, you can plant tomatoes, but they need so many days in order to have enough time in the garden. So you're a month and a half, 2 months, a little late on seeding them. You can seed them, but you're looking at almost early fall before you pick.
One of the things is to look at the frost, when frost comes, so when is the end of our summer when you're thinking of planting, so you can figure this out. A lot of the nurseries now have tomatoes in stock, and you have a lot of choices there, and you can figure out what kind of tomatoes you want and look at it there. I was over at one of them yesterday, and there were lots of tomatoes to pick from. I would suggest, since there's a lot of people are now interested in planting vegetable gardens, so I wouldn't postpone it too long.
Can you discuss how you water, watering can, spray hose, how much water?
Oh. You go.
How about you take that one, Ashley?
How much you water? Basically, in watering, I have a rain gauge. Your garden should get 1 inch of water a week, is what the books tell you. And if you haven't gotten that inch of water, and you won't in August or July around here, you need to water. And it depends what I'm watering, whether I'm going to use a hose. I very rarely use a hose, matter of fact. With my plants that I care about in the pots that like Guy was just showing you, I would use a sprinkling can. And be careful with that and be sure they're watered. When I use a spray hose, that would be more of the lawn or the whole enormous vegetable garden. What do you add to that, Guy?
Well, I tend to use a hose rather than waiting to fill a pot and a watering can and lugging it. And I will say that if you go, most garden centers have a display for a company called Gramm, Gramm, and there's watering wands which extend from the end of the hose, and I'll explain those in a second. And most of those have shutoffs, on-off valve. But the nozzles that Gramm developed, the regular one, and I don't know if there's a name for that particular one, it's the one you'll see the most of in the display, at full force if you turn your water on full force, it's not, it is a fairly gentle spray. Now they do have one with smaller holes that I like if I'm doing watering in something that I just seeded, that it's much finer, and if you have a motion back and forth, it's a nice amount of water, and as you come back to the same spot, usually the water has soaked in, so you're not puddling, which is very important when you seed things. You don't want to hold the water right over one spot and have it puddle, because a lot of times you're only 1/4 of an inch deep and you can wash everything right away. Another good reason for using that watering wand is that the distance between the shutoff and the nozzle, it kind of, you don't have as much pressure coming right out of the nozzle as if you put the nozzle on the end of the hose or on the end of the shutoff. Actually, it's the shutoff that half open would create more of a jet coming out of the nozzle. So having one of those watering wands and the shutoff with the nozzle on the end is a great way to water overhead.
Sounds like a good Father's Day gift. We should get one of those.
Okay, we have a lot of questions to get to.
Keep going.
Where can we get the free
We better keep going.
where do we get the free compost in town?
Oh, Hartwell Composting Facility off Hartwell Avenue. You drive in Monday through Friday, and you see right to the right a great big mountain of free compost. Bring your bucket and a shovel. You're getting exercise. It's one of the reasons why you're out in the garden. And next to it is a whole thing of wood chips. Next question. How do you water the newly how do you water the newly planted seeds so the seeds are not washed away? Now that's where I reuse my sprinkling bucket. How about you, Guy? How are you going to water those newly planted seeds?
Well, the watering can is fine, or as I explained, the dram nozzle that has the finer hole.
Okay.
And again, don't hold the water in one spot. Kind of have a nice, gentle sweeping motion over it.
Right, that'd be a good one.
I see a question on potatoes. What is the best way to grow potatoes? Well, the way that's most commonly done, of course, is in the ground, and it's great to plant them. A lot of garden centers will have different varieties of potatoes you can buy. If you watched the video and you saw the biggest pots that I had up that I was using or do use, for several years, I've filled those half full with soil or the mix, put the potatoes in, covered them with about 6 inches of mix. And then once they were up about 12 inches, I filled the pot in more. And the reason I grow them in big pots like that is when it's time to harvest, I just tip the pot over and pick the potatoes up and take them into supper. I don't have to do any digging.
We skipped a couple and there are a few more. Does the soil need to be changed each year?
No, if you have a good soil, I haven't. I mean, sometimes when I clean out in the fall, the root ball takes out some soil. So I just mix what's in there, loosen it up, and then add to it, bring it up to grade.
Okay. And the next question, or what are some good things we could plant now? You have to wait until it's warmer to plant your corn, your beans, your tomatoes. Now you can plant beets and carrots, potatoes, your parsley, you could lettuce, spinach, all those root crops. Do you have more to add to that list, Guy?
Yeah, what was the first thing, one of the first things you mentioned?
Beans and corn and tomatoes. I said wait until it's warmer, after the frost.
Yeah, corn can go in now. In fact, they started planting corn around Patriots Day.
Really?
Yeah, but that can start going in now. But your root crops can go in. The things that I probably wouldn't put in would be things in the nightshade family: tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, and I wouldn't put basil in yet, which reminds me of the current thing on basil for the last few years. A new strain of powdery mildew has been affecting basil. So in the last several years, if your basil hasn't done as well as it used to, when you go to buy it, or when you buy the seeds, you're buying a newer variety that is resistant to powdery mildew.
Okay. Are there any herbs and vegetables we should keep apart? I can't think of anything.
No, I don't think of anything to worry about.
Okay, we talked about fertilizer. Are there plants you can mix in with herbs and vegetables to deter pests? There's nothing that deters a rabbit.
No, marigolds supposedly keep insects away from tomatoes, etc.
I found the rabbits ate all my marigolds, so that was the end of that one.
Me too. And once the marigolds are gone, then the aphids come.
That's right. You put cans of beer.
There is a thing called liquid fence that is works very, very well for deer, but also rabbits. And I think it's considered an organic uh, product. I think the main ingredient is garlic in it, but maybe don't put it onto your lettuce or any leafy things that you eat. It can go on to trees and flowers and shrubs and everything, and it doesn't bother them. But I tend to do it around the plants as far as vegetables, not on them.
That washes off in the rain, doesn't it?
It's pretty good if you do it at the right rate, and that's easy. Just buy a ready-to-use product that you don't have to mix. And if you follow the directions, you do it, I think, once a week for the first couple of weeks, and then it's like once a month. But if you're watering that area or you're getting a lot of rain, it's not that hard to do once a week. Most people's gardens aren't that big, and it works.
Somebody said
Or,
recently, you take your soap scraps, you put them through your Cuisinart, grind them up, and you scatter the soap scraps around the garden that you're trying to protect. I haven't tried it, but I have noticed that rabbits don't like strong smelling things such as allium, nicotiana. They won't go near any of those. So I think the strong smells keep some of those animals away. One thing to keep animals away is pots, such as God used, because you can put, rabbits can't get into those pots. The squirrels can, however, if they want.
and chipmunks.
Yeah, chipmunks can be a little nasty too. What type of lettuce grows well in pots? All types, right?
Yeah.
Oh, here's the pumpkin question. We started pumpkins from a seed in a container for the first time. They're now about 5 inches tall. Should we put in the ground or a larger container? And if so, when and in how much light? Lots of light.
Yep, as much sun as you can give them. I think in the ground is better because they tend to run, the vines run, and they do root in as they go, which is important. So in the ground, and if you've started them inside and they're a little soft and tender, then you should put them out during the day for the next several days and then plant them. Let them kind of harden up outside, but watch your nights again for a few nights.
And figure they'll take a lot of room. The bottom of the container the gentleman built, did he have a plywood bottom? And what type of absorbent cloth was he referring to?
He didn't put the bottom in because he didn't want a rot problem. And being on bluestone, he had a solid bottom. And it's not an absorbent fabric. It's a sort of it's a fabric that he said he gets it at Ace Hardware. He gets the one in Bedford, but I would imagine all Ace Hardwares would have it. And if you go in and ask for a garden fabric, they should. I know the guys up in Bedford are very good. They'll know.
Yep. We use it and it prevents the weeds in the vegetable garden. It's one way of keeping it down. Matter of fact, there are containers like the gentleman made, which were beautiful, up behind the community center that the garden club gave with a grant from the CCOA. If you want to go up and look at that, those are filled with flowers. How do you keep rabbits away? We answered that. How to keep animals from eating lettuce? Do you put behind a fence? A fence is very, you notice Guy had a big fence. I had a fence in last week's garden. A fence really helps. Is there any reason you use such a large, deep pot for, say, the lettuces you planted? Their roots aren't that deep, and it takes a lot of soil and compost to fill the pot.
Right. You don't have to use it. The smallest pot I had up there, the 16-inch pot, would be fine for probably 5 heads.
You look better on TV. The way you. What do you consider a light liquid fertilizer? I would say compost tea is one thing you could do, where you put some of your compost and let it sit in your watering that you're going to use, and let it kind of sit around there for a couple days. You can use that directly on plants. Or you can actually use something like Miracle Grow.
Right, and I think they might be referring to when I probably said a light liquid feed, and that would be at half strength or 1/3 strength or quarter strength of the directions, so that you can do it more often.
Actually, we have a question from Nancy. Do you have to clean old pots? If yes, what do you use to clean them?
Do you have to clean? Go on, Guy, you answer.
Typically, no. As an easy answer, that I've used clay pots and plastic pots and wooden pots for years, and we've never washed them. I can't think of any disease that we've had or any problem that we've had in order to wash them.
We used to have great discussions before the plant sale. To watch the pots.
In fact, I used to put clay pots under the benches in some of the greenhouses that didn't have cement floors, so that the moss and the algae would grow on them, and they look better than the ones that Martha Stewart did artificially.
That's great. Well, I think we've come to an end, and thank you, Guy, for being our guru for today. You certainly have a lot of experience and knowledge to offer all of us. And
Well, thanks.
it's so wonderful with the vegetables. As we see what's happening in the groceries and the food in this country, the more that we can grow our own and have fresh food on our table, it's a wonderful thing for all of us. And I know my kids and grandkids have learned a lot from doing it. It's a whole thing to restart, maybe, as part of the country. Thank you all.
I'd like to, if I can, while I was waiting to go on, I was reading Johnny's catalog, and people should take a look at it. When I think of the possibilities of people growing their own greens in just inexpensive shallow trays and window boxes, and on a regular basis they can have fresh sprouts and greens all summer long and well into the fall, just the greens themselves.
That's right.
There's a lot of things people will find are very easy to do if they just do a little research and go from there.
And it's so exciting to walk in with your first tomato off your pot. Thank you all for joining us. There will be another program next week on flowers.
Oh, I think it's in 2 weeks, actually. Sun and shade flowers. But thank you again. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Guy. This was really wonderful. I have learned a tremendous amount, and I'm sure a lot of people here have. The video will be available on YouTube hopefully soon, and I will share it with everybody. And I wish you well in your gardening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Can Ashley, I'm going to stop the recording.